The morning after our wedding, my newlywed husband threw a filthy, dripping kitchen towel straight into my face. He told me that from this moment on, cooking and cleaning were my sole responsibilities because he was not going to harbor a freeloader. Cold grease and leftover sink water trickled down my cheek, while his parents stood in the background, fully endorsing the humiliation. What my new family did not realize was that I had $45,000 tucked safely inside my suitcase, and I had absolutely no intention of playing their victim. Looking back, the signs of their entitlement were everywhere long before we walked down the aisle. His mother, Brenda, had made endless comments about a woman knowing her place, while my father-in-law, Gary, simply ignored the dynamic entirely. My husband, Derek, had promised my tearful parents at the reception that he would cherish me forever, but those vows evaporated the second the guests went home. My parents had even handed me a cashier's check right after the wedding, warning me that Derek's mother seemed controlling and that having my own financial cushion would guarantee my independence. Instead of screaming or cowering when that dirty towel hit my face, I pulled it off with a calm customer service smile and told him I understood. Derek stood there completely speechless, stripped of the explosive fight he had clearly prepared for, while his mother urged him to break me in early before I got any ideas. I calmly walked into the kitchen, washed the grime off my skin with soap 3 distinct times, and folded my brand new apron on the counter. Then I headed straight upstairs to our bedroom, unzipped my suitcase, and packed every single thing I owned into my bags. Downstairs, Derek was casually playing games on his phone, expecting me to be scrubbing dishes on my hands and knees. I rolled my suitcase into the living room, paused by the front door, and casually announced that since I was not going to be a freeloader, I was simply not going to live there anymore. Brenda began shrieking about my duty as a daughter-in-law, while Derek threatened that if I walked out that door, I would never be allowed back. I just smiled, reminded them to disinfect that filthy rag, and stepped out into the morning sun as the heavy front door clicked shut behind me. By the time I reached the main road, my phone was exploding with frantic calls and hostile text messages from Derek, but I blocked his number without reading a single word. My mother called me moments later, her voice tight with anxiety, asking if the Henderson family was mistreating me. The second I told her I was coming home and getting a divorce, she stopped asking questions and simply told me she would make my favorite dinner because my family would always have my back. I spent my first night of freedom at my best friend Harper's condo, drinking ice-cold beers and plotting my financial and legal strategy. Harper immediately offered me her guest room for as long as I needed and connected me with an aggressive family law attorney named Sterling. Meanwhile, my dad called to inform me that Derek and his parents had already shown up at my parents' house screaming and trying to force their way inside until my father called the police to remove them. The harassment escalated rapidly when Derek sent his cousin Megan to Harper's apartment complex to scream outside our door, calling me a gold-digging scammer in front of all the neighbors. Instead of hiding, I walked right out onto the balcony, looked down at the gathering crowd, and loudly exposed how Derek had thrown a greasy rag in my face on day one. When the police officers arrived to handle the disturbance, they sternly warned Megan that throwing objects constituted assault and threatened to arrest her on the spot if she did not leave immediately. Realizing he was losing control over the situation, Derek tried using a series of burner numbers to text me a mix of desperate apologies and terrifying threats. He claimed he would make my whole family suffer and ruin my reputation across the entire city if I did not return on my knees. I calmly informed him that every single word he spoke was being recorded from my attorney, and I advised him to save his energy for the family court judge. Within 3 days, I had secured a high-end apartment with fob security, landed a graphic design role at a top branding agency, and hired a team of legal advisors. Derek believed that leaving him would leave me helpless, but watching my life flourish without him only drove his insecurity through the roof. When he realized I was completely self-sufficient and unfazed by his intimidation, he resorted to launching a smear campaign on local social media groups using a burner account. He posted our wedding photos online alongside a sob story claiming I had scammed his family out of $30,000 and abandoned him without cause. The internet outrage machine immediately turned against me, prompting strangers to flood the comment sections with hateful remarks and threats. I knew I could not defend myself with desperate emotional pleas, so I decided to respond with irrefutable, hard evidence. I uploaded a public response complete with the selfie showing the red marks on my face, the photograph of the filthy rag on the counter, the formal police incident report, and screenshots of his threatening text messages. Within an hour, the narrative completely flipped, and the entire city began publicly roasting Derek for his abusive behavior and fragile ego. Local news outlets even picked up the story anonymously, transforming my personal nightmare into a massive public lesson on self-respect and marital equality. Derek's world completely collapsed under the weight of the public backlash he had created for himself. His employer initiated an internal review after seeing his text threats. My cousin Caleb stood guard to ensure my safety, and the local police department officially brought Derek in for questioning regarding cyber harassment. Desperate to avoid criminal charges and public humiliation, he dropped all of his ridiculous demands for a public apology and begged to settle out of court. On the morning of our formal mediation, Derek and his parents sat across from me looking utterly defeated, flanked by a nervous attorney who knew they had no legal ground to stand on. Mr. Sterling laid out our evidence with clinical precision, proving that Derek had committed domestic battery and that my parents' gift was entirely my separate property, facing potential lawsuits, criminal charges, and mounting legal fees. Derek had no choice but to accept our final offer. I agreed to return $10,000 from the original wedding gift solely to finalize an uncontested divorce and erase him from my life forever. The Hendersons signed the paperwork in bitter silence, realizing that their attempts to break me had cost them their reputation, their pride, and their control. Standing outside the courthouse in the bright afternoon light, I finally took a deep breath of fresh air. I had entered that house as a target, but I walked away as the sole author of my own destiny.